Hey everybody, it's Randy Ray here at Driftwood Ranch. I'm trying out a new microphone today, so we'll see if the sound's a little better than usual. Leave a note in the comments if it is. This is my Nonfiction November 2023 video where I'm going to show off I hesitate to even call it a Nonfiction November TBR list because really it's just a list of options that I won't finish. I'll be lucky to finish 4 nonfiction books in Nonfiction November, but I've got 7 that I'm going to choose from. If you've watched my channel very long and been paying attention, you have probably noticed that most of what I talk about here is fiction. I like to read novels, which is the opposite of some people. Steve Donahue obviously prefers to read nonfiction, for example. But apparently this is a really old YouTube event, and this will be the first time I'll be participating in it. There's another event going on in November called Dr. November, which I'm co-hosting. So I've got to read some spy novels too. But they don't have to be novels. I could find some nonfiction spy espionage books to read, although I don't have any of those to show you today. But I do have cool books that I'm meaning to get to for a while. Also, before I forget, I should thank a Book Olive who is hosting this event and who has one of the most wonderful channels on BookTube. And I think I might have mentioned her in one of my other videos about booktubers you should follow. At any rate, I want to get straight to the books now. At the top of my list, just because it's at the top of the stack of books, it's not necessarily at the top of my list in terms of importance, is, golly, I'm from Northeast Texas. I meant to look up how to pronounce this before I made the video, and then I forgot. But I think it's called Palimpsest, a memoir by Gore Vidal. And Gore Vidal is a very witty writer, but I think he's witty in a way that's a lot better than Oscar Wilde, for example, who just exhausts me with his little sayings. But here's what it says on the back. A tremendous read, down and dirty from start to finish, a work of considerable artistry. Martin Amis. Who am I to argue with Martin Amis? But here's the rest of it. Palimpsest is Gore Vidal's account of the first 39 years of his life as a novelist, dramatist, critic, political activist and candidate, screenwriter, television commentator, and controversialist, and as a man who knew pretty much everybody worth knowing. Here, recalled with the charm and razor-sharp wit of one of the great raconteurs of our time, are Vidal's birth into a Washington, D.C. political clan, his school days, his service in World War II, his emergence as a literary wunderkind in New York, his time in Hollywood, London, Paris, and Rome, his campaign for Congress, in which he outpolled JFK in his district, and his legendary feuds with, among many others, Truman Capote and William F. Buckley Jr. At the emotional heart of the book is Vidal's evocation of his first and greatest love, boyhood friend Jimmy Trimble, who was killed in battle on Iwo Jima. Chosen by the New York Times as one of the best American memoirs of the past 50 years, this is Vidal on Vidal, a great and supremely entertaining writer on a great and endlessly fascinating subject. Who wouldn't want to read that, okay? So I'm very excited about that. And I'm drinking some coffee out of my Bad Art coffee mug today. If you've got some coffee, I encourage you to drink it. Steve likes to tease me for ostentatiously drinking coffee during my videos. This next book was a gift from my friend Amy, and it is by Matthew Hongoltz-Netling, and it's called A Libertarian Walks into a Bear, the Utopian Plot to Liberate an American Town and Some Bears. Praise for A Libertarian Walks into a Bear. I should show you the cover. Since the beginning, Americans have been fighting about the balance between individual liberty and the common good. Hongoltz-Netling shows what can happen when one rural New Hampshire town went to the libertarian extreme in this madcap tale that zigzags between tragedy and farce with the possibility of being eaten. Colin Woodward, New York Times best-selling author of Americans, Nations, and Union. And then the next quote is, a libertarian walks into a bear is a finely drawn portrait of one freedom-loving town and a joyful romp through the dark corners of the American psyche. Matthew Hongoltz-Netling is a gifted writer with a high-powered radar for the strange details of American life. He skillfully portrays the dreamers and eccentrics who populate Grafton and the bears lurking just beyond its tree lines. At turns hilarious and alarming, this story had me firmly in its jaws from the opening pages. Evan Ratliff, author of The Mastermind. And finally, Matthew Hongoltz-Netling's wild and wonderful blend of small-town America and large-scale ideals, imparted with humor and insight reminiscent of Sarah Vowell and Bill Bryson, is an unpredictable and endlessly fascinating feat of immersive reporting filled with singular characters and donut-eating bears. Michael Finkel, best-selling author of The Stranger in the Woods. So that sounds pretty exciting to me too. It comes highly recommended by one of my favorite and most intelligent friends. And also it looks blessedly short. It's only about 250 pages long. And I've been meaning to read this for quite a while, and I just haven't gotten to it. Number 3, Dopesick Dealers, Doctors, and the Drug Company That Addicted America by Beth, Macy. 100 notable books in the New York Times Book Review and the inspiration for the Hulu original series, which I saw and which was excellent, especially the performance from Michael Keaton. And Tom Hanks. Dopesick is a deep and deeply needed look into the troubled soul of America. Macy's harrowing account of the opioid epidemic, in which hundreds of thousands have already died, masterfully interlaces stories of communities in crisis with dark histories of corporate greed and regulatory indifference. Believe it or not, corporate greed is a big character in any kind of modern historical newsy type book. And here's the summary. In this masterful work, Beth Macy takes us to the epicenter of America's decades-long struggle with opioid addiction. From the creation and distribution of the deadliest, most lucrative painkillers the world has ever known, to the courtrooms where greed and corruption are starting to be held to account. From the addicts on the perilous road to recovery to the communities grappling with loss and stigma, this gripping narrative illuminates the complicated heart of a national crisis as persistent as it is entrenched. Though unsparing yet deeply human stories of the families and first responders struggling to ameliorate this epidemic in politically fragmented times, Macy shows that, astonishingly, the one thing that unites Americans across geographic and class lines is opioid drug abuse. And I can understand why. The only thing I ever liked better than whiskey was opioids. But they go together like peanut butter and jelly too, which is really dangerous and scary for someone like me who doesn't have any brakes when it comes to that sort of thing. That's not on the back cover, that's just me editorializing. But in a country unable to provide basic health care for all, Macy still finds reason to hope. Ample signs of the spirit, compassion, and tenacity necessary for those facing addiction to build a better future for themselves, their families, and their communities. So, the TV series on Hulu was excellent. I don't see any reason why the book that inspired it wouldn't also be great. And the real reason I drink coffee all the time on my channel is because my mouth gets dry from the medications that I'm on. All right, so this next one is a granddaddy. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's called Blood in the Water, The Attica Prison Uprising of 1971 and Its Legacy, and it's written by Heather Ann Thompson. I didn't know what Attica was until I watched and then rewatched, now I can't remember the name of the movie. It's the one where Dustin Hoffman is robbing a bank. And, he becomes a little bit of a news sensation, and there are people, outside in the street, and goes out there and starts yelling about what is Attica, and Chris Sarandon turns out to be his lover. Spoiler alert. I guess spoiler alert should come first, huh? Anyway, this is the book here. This is a massive tome, by the way. This is over 600 pages long if you include the notes. But if you skip the notes, 565 pages long, still pretty big book. Winner of the Bancroft Prize, Rittenhauer Prize, finalist for the National Book Award, Silver Gavel Award, and Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and a New York Times notable book. One of the best books of the year, the Boston Globe. Newsweek, the Christian Science Monitor, Bloomberg, the Buffalo News, Baltimore City Paper, the Marshall Project, and Smithsonian. I guess they all said this is one of the best books of the year. On September 9th, 1971, nearly 1,300 prisoners took over the Attica Correctional Facility in upstate New York to protest years of mistreatment. They took 38 hostages and over the next several days negotiated with officials for improved conditions in the prison. On September 13th, the state abruptly ended discussions and sent hundreds of heavily armed troopers and correction officers to retake the prison by force. Their gunfire killed 39 men, hostages as well as prisoners, and severely wounded more than 100 others. In the days that followed, troopers and officers brutally retaliated against the prisoners. And in the aftermath, New York State authorities prosecuted only the prisoners, never once bringing charges against the officials involved in the violent retaking of the prison. Drawing from more than a decade of extensive research, historian Heather Ann Thompson illuminates every aspect of the uprising and its legacy, giving voice to all those who took part in the 45-year fight for justice. Blood in the Water is the searing and indelible account of one of the most important civil rights stories of the last century. This would be a good book for my daughter to read. One of my daughters is majoring in social work at Texas Women's University, specifically in forensic social work. And I asked her what that was exactly. And it's, a combination of getting justice for prisoners and helping them reacclimate to society when they get out of prison. I'm very proud of her and what she wants to do with her life. And she's a reader, too. Both my daughters are readers, so I got something right. Next on my list, and most of these are books that I've been meaning to read for quite a while, and I've even started some of these. This one's called The Great Influenza, the story of the deadliest pandemic in history by John M. Barry. And this is not about COVID. This is, well, I'll just read you the back of it and you'll know what it's about. Great cover, though. In the winter of 1918, at the height of World War I, history's most lethal influenza virus erupted in an army camp in Kansas, moved east with American troops, then exploded, killing as many as 100 million people worldwide. It killed more people in 24 weeks than AIDS killed in 24 years, more in a year than the Black Death killed in a century. But this was not the Middle Ages. And 1918 marked the first collision between modern science and epidemic disease. Magisterial in its breadth of perspective and depth of research, The Great Influenza weaves together multiple narratives with characters ranging from William Welch, founder of Johns Hopkins Medical School, to John D. Rockefeller and Woodrow Wilson. Ultimately a tale of triumph amid tragedy, this crisis provides us with a precise and sobering model as we confront the epidemics looming on our own horizon. And this is another big book. It looks like it's about 500 pages. So it's not as big as the Attica book, but it's big nonetheless. And now for something completely different, and this is number 6 on my list of Nonfiction November potential reads. This is Charlie Chaplain, A Brief Life by Peter Ackroyd. It's a biography, obviously, of Charlie Chaplain. You know, when I was younger, the first silent film star that I ever learned anything about was Charlie Chaplain. Then, when I went to college, I learned about Buster Keaton. And as a young man with an ego likes to do, I decided that Buster Keaton was vastly underrated and should be better known than Chaplain because he's a lot funnier. And now that I've gotten older, I've gone back and rewatched some Charlie Chaplain films. And I got to tell you, he's amazing. There's a movie. See, I have trouble remembering things because I'm on cancer meds. But he made a movie about a blind girl that he falls in love with. She's selling flowers in the street. And it's got so many great scenes in it. It's got that big, it's called City Lights is the name of the movie. I looked it up on my computer here. But I think City Lights is one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's definitely in my top 10. And it's a silent film. So it's incredibly funny, but it's also very touching at the same time and extremely influential. Charlie Chaplain was born in 1889 and lived to 1977. He lived to be 88 years old. But I understand that Peter Ackroyd is a great writer. Chaplain's rise makes an enthralling story, and it's one perfectly suited to Peter Ackroyd's prodigious and idiosyncratic talents. Ackroyd acknowledges Chaplin's many human failings, while at the same time giving us a vivid sense of what made the man a genius. That's from the Telegraph. And for those of you who don't know, Charlie Chaplin was kind of a wild man in the bedroom. And he did not always behave well with women. He was a little bit of a cad. But, times were different then too. A fine biography, the luxury of a short book about a vast life, cannot be overestimated. Financial Times. Ackroyd has turned in the best account of Chaplin's formation beneath the teetering chimney stacks of Victorian London, fragrant with the odors of dung, smoke, and beer. Ackroyd is just the man to puncture the whoppers with which Chaplin embroidered his past without being too much of a scold. That's from the New Statesman. There's some other quotes on here, but I think you get the idea. I do like the idea that this is a fairly short book, too. It's about 250, 260 pages, looks like. And now, for something else completely different. And this is number 7 on... Oh, how did this get water damaged? This is number 7 on my list of potential Nonfiction November reads. This is The Church of Baseball. The making of Bull Durham, home runs, bad calls, crazy fights, big swings, and a hit. And it's written by Ron Shelton. Ron Shelton, of course, was the screenwriter behind Bull Durham and drew from his own experiences playing minor league baseball. He's also known for writing the screenplay to Tin Cup. But, so we've got raves for Ron Shelton's The Church of Baseball. This really is one of my favorite movies, and definitely my favorite baseball movie of all time. This book tells you how to make a movie, the whole 9 innings of it, out of nothing but sheer will. And it's Ron Shelton, so you can't stop smiling, even when it all goes sideways. It's always fascinating to hear how great films fall together. This time you've got the guy who called the game spinning the yarn. Major league stuff. And that's a quote from Tony Gilroy, the writer-director of Michael Clayton and The Bourne Legacy. I'm not going to read all of these because there's quite a few, but I'll read one more. I'm among the legion of fans who loved the romantic comedy and semi-autobiographical movie Bull Durham, written and directed by Ron Shelton. His new book, The Church of Baseball, The Making of Bull Durham, is an enchanting education on how Crash and Nuke and Annie and Shelton and their madcap medley of co-characters overcame real and fictionalized obstacles to populate a variety of ballparks and bedrooms and, in dramatic fact, triumph over the snooty suits in Hollywood suites. Ira Burkow, Pulitzer Prize-winning sports columnist and author of Baseball's Best Ever, a half-century of covering Hall of Famers. You know what? I know how this got damaged, too. I had a date over one night, and she spilled a glass of wine on the back of it. But the inside pages aren't damaged, but the inside cover, you can see how it's got a little purple down there. And on the back cover, you can see the purple stains. It was red wine she was drinking that night. She blamed it on me, too, but it wasn't my fault. She was just drunk. I digress. Anyway, so those are my Nonfiction November possibilities this year. It's a much shorter list than the video Steve Donahue put out with his Nonfiction November recommendations, which I believe had something like 40 or 50 books on the list, which is hardly manageable for someone who only reads 50 or 60 pages per hour. I just don't have that many hours in a month. Although, I gotta admit, all the books on his list look pretty interesting too. So, anyway, let me know what you're gonna read, if you've already planned it, for Nonfiction November, if you're participating, in the comments or whatever. And I will see you soon with another video. Thanks for watching.